"A marriage made in a ledger deserves no poetry," said the Duke of Norrington, setting down his glass untouched, "and I will not pretend otherwise for the sake of a cake." The wedding breakfast went very quiet. Thurston, 7th Duke of Norrington, had said only what the entire county believed, and he had said it because his cousin's bride had a father with debts and a smile too ready. He expected the usual response to his plain speaking: lowered eyes, a hurried change of subject, somebody's aunt discovering an urgent interest in the flowers. Instead, a woman rose at the far end of the table. She was the elder sister. He had noticed her earlier only as one notices a chair that has been moved. Brown hair pinned without ornament, a gray gown 2 seasons behind the fashion, a mended cuff she had not troubled to hide. She did not raise her voice. That was the worst of it. "Your Grace," she said, "you are the coldest thing in this room, and this room contains 3 aspects." Somebody's fork struck a plate. Thurston felt the blood move in his face for the first time in perhaps 9 years. "My sister," the woman went on, "has been in love with your cousin since she was 17, through 2 poor harvests and 1 bad winter, and she has darned his mother's stockings without being asked. You have known them 1 hour and priced them like a horse. If that is what a dukedom teaches a man, then I am glad we are poor, for at least we may still be kind." "Bethia," her mother whispered, in a voice like a kettle. "Miss Marchbank," said Thurston. "Your Grace." He waited for her to retreat. Every person he had ever contradicted had retreated. She stood there with her hands folded in front of her mended cuff, and looked at him as though she were prepared to remain standing until the candles burned down. He inclined his head, because there was nothing else in him to do, and he left the breakfast without eating. In the carriage his steward, Halliwell, sat with the accounts case on his knees and the particular expression of a man who has heard everything and intends to mention none of it. "Say it," Thurston told him. "The bride's father's debts, your Grace, settled last Tuesday as instructed. £211 to the corn merchant, 60 to the saddler, and the mortgage on the mill house redeemed in full." Halliwell coughed. "Anonymously, as instructed." "It stays anonymous." "Your Grace, if the elder Miss Marchbank knew that the man she called cold had—" "It stays anonymous," Thurston said, and turned his face to the window, where the hedgerows went by in a long green blur. He had not paid the debts out of tenderness. He had paid them because a bride's family in ruin drags a bridegroom down after it, and his cousin was the only living relative who still wrote to him at Christmas. That was the shape of Thurston's affection: quiet, ledgered, entirely invisible. He had learned it from a father who had married a fortune and never once looked at the woman who came with it. His mother had died at Norrington in a room full of silver, thanked by no one. A marriage made in a ledger deserves no poetry. He had meant it as a warning, and it had come out of his mouth as an insult, and a woman in a gray gown had told him so in front of 40 people. He did not sleep well that night, and he blamed the venison. 3 weeks later, he had business at the county bridge, which happened to stand within a half-mile of Marchbank House, and he had honestly convinced himself of the coincidence for most of the ride. The bridge needed a new parapet. He was told this by a mason, and then told it again, in more detail and with a better grasp of the cost, by a woman kneeling in the churchyard grass with a slate on her knee and 11 village girls in a half-circle around her. 2 shillings the foot for dressed stone if the carter is honest, Bethia Marchbank said, not getting up. "He is not honest. Say 2 and 3. She glanced at her pupils. "Continue with your sums, please, Prudence, and 8 is not a snowman." "You keep the parish accounts," Thurston said. "Somebody must. The rector has a beautiful voice and no head for figures." She set the slate down and rose, brushing grass from her skirt. "Have you come to be apologized to, Your Grace? I should tell you at once that I have nothing prepared. I have come about the bridge. The bridge is at the bottom of the lane and does not require a duke." He discovered, to his own considerable surprise, that he wished to laugh. He mastered it. "Then I have come to hear the rest of it," he said. "You were interrupted at the breakfast. Your mother said your name in a manner suggesting she has said it that way before." For the first time something in her face gave way. "You want the rest of it." "I find that, when a thing is true, I would rather have all of it at once." She looked at him a moment longer, then told the girls to go and count the sheep in the near field, which they did with the enthusiasm of the recently released. Then she sat on the low churchyard wall and made room, and because there was nowhere else in the county he wished to be, the Duke of Norrington sat down on a wall. "My father died owing money," she said. "I have kept the house standing for 6 years on eggs, sewing, and the arithmetic of desperation. My sister is pretty, and so my mother spent what there was on her, which was sensible, and it worked, and I am glad of it. What I could not bear was to hear a stranger call her love a ledger, when I am the one who has done the ledger every night for 6 years, so that she might be allowed to love at all." The wind moved in the yews. Thurston sat with his hands on his knees and thought of £211 paid to a corn merchant, and how easy it would be, and how contemptible, to spend it now. "Then the insult was mine," he said. "It was. And you will not withdraw yours." I would not know how to begin. There truly were 3 aspects. That was the moment. He understood afterwards, though at the time he only noticed that the churchyard had become an unusually pleasant place, and that the light was good, and that he had been staring at a mended cuff. She gave him tea at Marchbank House because the rain came on. The cup had a chip in the rim, and she turned it so that the chip faced away from him, and he turned it back and drank from that side deliberately, and she saw him do it, and neither of them remarked upon it. He rode home in the wet, and Halliwell, meeting him in the hall with a candle, said that his Grace appeared to have been out in the weather. "The parapet is to be dressed stone," Thurston said. 2 and 3 the foot. The carter is not honest." He came back in June about a drainage ditch, and in July about a charity school that did not yet exist, and by August the county had begun to talk, which the county did as naturally as breathing. At the Ashfield Assembly he heard a viscountess named Lady Corville say, behind her fan and not nearly behind it enough, that the Duke of Norrington had taken to collecting curiosities, and that the newest was a spinster in darned gloves. Thurston crossed the room. He did not cross it to Lady Corville. He crossed it to the pillar near the door where Bethia Marchbank stood with her sister, wearing the gray gown, her gloves darned at the second finger of the left hand. Holding a glass of lemonade, she plainly had no intention of drinking. "Miss Marchbank," he said, "the 2 dances after this are mine, and then you will take my arm through the length of the room slowly, and I will be seen to laugh at something you say. And if I say nothing amusing, then I shall laugh at nothing, and they will assume the worst of my wits, which will do them good." Her mouth moved. "Your Grace is aware that this will be in every drawing-room by Thursday." "That is my entire object." He danced with her twice. He was not a graceful man. He was a large man who had been taught to dance by a Frenchman with a stick, and he counted in his head, and she noticed and did not mind, and once she said quietly, 4, Your Grace, not 5, and he came near to disgracing himself with laughter in the middle of a set. Afterwards he walked her the length of that glittering room at a pace that could only be called insolent, and the chandeliers threw their crystal light down on a duke and a woman in a two-season gown, and the whispering swelled behind them like water behind a mill wheel, and he did not care. That was the discovery of his 39th year. He had spent his life being feared because being feared required nothing of him. Being seen beside her required everything, and he found he wanted to pay it. The county did not forgive her for it. He had not calculated on how the bill would be presented or to whom. In September, his cousin's mother, Mrs. Talland, came to Norrington in a hired chaise, wept a little, and explained with enormous gentleness that dear Bethia had been spoken of most unkindly, that a girl with nothing must guard her name, that Lady Corville had cut her at church, and that it would be kinder, truly kinder, your grace, if the Duke were to be a little less attentive, and that Bethia herself, being sensible, had already answered an advertisement for a companion to an elderly lady in Northumberland, and was to go up by the Thursday coach. Thurston stood at his own window for a long time after the chaise had gone. The letter came the next morning. He knew before he broke the seal that it would be short, and that it would not ask him for anything. "Your Grace," she had written, "I am to go into Northumberland, where I am told the air is bracing and the lady deaf, so I shall be able to keep the accounts in peace. I do not regret one word I said to you at my sister's wedding, and I would be obliged if you would not permit anyone to tell you that I do. I have left the parish book with the rector. The columns are marked, and he must not be allowed near the subtractions. Do not trouble the bridge on my account. It is finished, and it is very fine, and I shall think of it. Yours in gratitude, B. Marchbank." He read it 3 times. Then he called for his horse, and Halliwell, who had been a steward for 22 years and had never once seen his master hurry, dropped the accounts case. The Thursday coach changed horses at the Red Hart at 7:30 in the morning. Thurston came into the inn yard as the ostlers were leading out the greys, in a coat wet to the shoulders, without a hat, and found her standing beside one small trunk in the grey light, with her bonnet strings knotted like a woman who had tied them in the dark. "Miss Marchbank, you are without a hat," she said. "There is nothing in the world so undignified as a duke without a hat." "I paid your father's debts," he said. Every ostler in the yard turned to stone. "In the week before the wedding," he went on more quietly, £211 to the corn merchant, 60 to the saddler, and the mill house redeemed. I did it out of arithmetic, not affection, because I am a man who was taught to give in figures and never in words, and then I stood up at my cousin's breakfast and priced 2 people who love each other as if they were a lot at auction. You were entirely right about me. I have been 11 weeks discovering how right, and I did not tell you about the money because I did not want you to be grateful. Gratitude would have been the end of the only honest voice that has ever been raised to me. The greys were put to. Somebody said something about the mail, and nobody moved. "Why are you telling me now?" she said. "Because you are getting into a coach, and I find that I cannot let you go up into Northumberland believing that I was ever indifferent to you." He took a breath. "Marry me, not to rescue you. You have rescued a household of 4 for 6 years on eggs and arithmetic, and you do not require rescuing, which is precisely why I am asking. Keep your school. Keep your parish book. Keep your tongue, above all keep your tongue, and turn it upon me whenever I deserve it, which will be often, because I am 40 next spring and I have no practice at being loved." The bonnet strings were shaking. She put her hand up and stilled them. "Your Grace," she said, "I have a mended cuff. I have counted the stitches. There are 9. They will say, you have lost your reason. They have said worse of me, and I have never once corrected them. I should like, at last, to be talked about for something I am proud of." She looked at the coach. She looked at the small trunk and at the ostlers and at the wet coat. And then Bethia Marchbank did the only thing in the whole business that took him wholly by surprise. She laughed, one broken breath of it, and put her hand into his. "Then somebody had better tell the rector about the subtractions," she said. They were married 4 months on, in the chapel at Norrington, on a hard, bright morning in January with frost on the yews. It was not a large wedding. The bride wore ivory silk and her grandmother's garnets, and she walked up the aisle at the pace of a woman who had decided long ago not to hurry for anybody. Her sister cried. Her mother said her name several times in the old kettle voice, and was ignored with great affection. Lady Corville did not come, and was never afterwards invited, and made much of both facts. The Duke of Norrington stood at the altar rail and watched his Duchess come towards him, and thought that he had spent 39 years in a house full of silver, thanked by no one, and that he had heard the truth spoken to him exactly once, at a wedding breakfast, over an aspic. Afterwards there was a chipped teacup on the mantelpiece of the great drawing-room at Norrington, between a Chinese vase worth 600 guineas and a bronze his grandfather had brought from Rome. Guests remarked upon it. The Duke never explained it. The Duchess would sometimes turn it so that the chip faced outward, and he would turn it back, and she would see him do it. She kept the village school. She kept the parish book, and in time the accounts of the estate as well, and Halliwell learned to bring the ledgers to her first. On winter evenings she read the columns aloud to him by the fire, in the voice she had once used to tell a duke exactly what he was, and he listened with his eyes shut like a man at a concert. "You are not cold," she said to him once late, when the candles had burned down. "I was," said Thurston. "There were 3 aspics and a woman in a grey gown, and it appears that was the end of it."